Welcome to FabFems Friday with the Women in STEM at UT Austin. Today's focus is on professional skills and interpersonal skills. And we also have a spotlight on mechanical engineering. And we have a fabulous lineup still through the rest of July, focusing in on some different engineering majors and as well as STEM and professional skills. So we hope you continue to join in on these panel discussions each week with our current students and alumni and STEM role models. I'm Trisha Berry. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Executive Director for Women in STEM within the Division of Diversity and Community Engagement at UT Austin. And you may find many of our FabFems Friday webinar panelists and other STEM role models in the FabFems Role Model Directory. And we'll throw that web link into the chat so you can access fabfems.org at your leisure and find other STEM role models to connect with. The directory is managed by the National Girls Collaborative Project, and it's designed to help increase that career awareness and interest in STEM. And you can search for FabFems role models on all kinds of different keywords and factors like zip code or field of work, ethnicity, location, interest in engineering and STEM, all kinds of different options. So I encourage you to check that out. We're also adding all of our FabFems Friday webinars to our WiSTEM YouTube channel. I'll throw that link in the chat as well. And you can find the FabFems Friday playlist as well as other videos that may be of interest there. So with that, again, our focus today is on professional skills, in particular interpersonal skills, and we have a spotlight on mechanical engineering. And I'm excited to give a shout out today as well to the Applied Materials Foundation for supporting our Women in STEM Create at UT Summer Camp. I know we have a number of summer camp participants who join in on our FabFems Fridays, and so thank you to Applied Materials for your fabulous support. So the way this is going to work now, we're going to have each of our panelists share some quick introductions in just a moment to get us started. And then after the introductions, we'll have a few pre-selected questions for our panelists, but then we're also taking questions from you, our audience. So please use the Q&A portion of the system to submit your questions. There's a Q&A pod that you can ask questions within, and we'll use that to pull the questions out and ask them to our fabulous panelists when we get to that point. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our fabulous panelists and have them share who they are and where they're from and what their discipline is and where they work, and also something fun outside of the workspace that they do, a hobby or some other kind of activity. So Clayton, Sue, you want to kick us off there?
Yeah, hi guys. My name is Clayton and I use she, her pronouns. I currently live in Fort Worth, Texas, and I majored in mechanical engineering at UT, class of 2019. And then I graduated with my master's degree in prosthetics and orthotics from UT Southwestern Medical Center in Dallas this past December. So I'm currently doing my orthotic and prosthetic residency at Baker Prosthetics and Orthotics in Fort Worth. And then a fun hobby is I like to cook. So anything in the kitchen, kind of trying some new recipes, it's pretty fun.
So what's your favorite dish right now that you like to make?
I'm really into like a summer salad, like a nice fresh with fruit, maybe a little goat cheese. That's pretty good.
Oh, hey, you're gonna make me hungry now. That's awesome. Thank you. Jessica, what about you?
Hi. Yeah, of course. I'm so happy to be here today. Thanks so much, Trisha. My name is Jessica Voss. I use she, her pronouns as well. I was born and raised in Alaska, but went to school at UT Austin, got a bachelor's in aerospace engineering, and I currently live in Seabrook, Texas, it's like South Houston. It's where Johnson Space Center is located. I work for Johnson Space Center supporting the Orion spacecraft program. I support the vehicle integration office, and in particular, I work on the crew systems integration. So basically anything that the astronauts need inside the cabin to execute their mission and remain safe and healthy for the whole time going to the moon and back. That's my job. I help integrate all of those systems. So it's very fun, very exciting, a lot of human in the loop kind of testing and integration work. So Let's see, on the side for fun, I've been working at Johnson Space Center for over 20 years now. I started in the fall of '99 as a co-op or an intern while I was in the aerospace engineering program at UT. And ever since then, during that time, I also started teaching fitness classes. And I'm still to this day teaching fitness classes. I teach spin and yoga and dance and strength. And so yeah, that's my side hobby. In addition to just traveling and hiking, being from Alaska originally, I really love the outdoors. So yeah, that's me.
That's awesome. Do you have a favorite fitness class that you like to teach?
Oh my gosh, you know, it really depends on the mood, right? I will say I used to teach dance a lot more often than I do now. It just was, it was around, the opportunity presented itself a lot more at the NASA gym here. They have a gym on site at NASA. And it was just so much fun. We would teach a routine, a new dance routine every month. So you could really master the routine by the end of the month. And these class participants, it was like making a music video. You know, it was really fun.
That sounds very fun. That's awesome. We need a Women in STEM music video class. There we go. Our new goal. Yeah. Caitlin, how about you?
Yeah, I'm Caitlin Hunt, she, her pronouns. Grew up in central South Texas, Seguin, Texas, little town outside of San Antonio. My degree's in mechanical engineering, graduated in 2012, and went into the acoustics field. I work at Kierkegaard now. We focus on 3 elements of acoustics: room acoustics, sound isolation, and noise control. So anything that you can think of that in any building that involves one of those 3 things, we try to have a hand in it, ideally on the design side, but sometimes after the fact when people are having some problems hearing neighbors, noise they don't want to hear, or maybe a space is too reverberant, that sort of thing. So coming up on 10 years in the field. I've made some shifts in kind of where my focus is, but right now with my company, I focus on performance spaces and music making spaces, specifically higher ed buildings is most of what we do. So to that end, outside of work, I love music. I play in a little band with some of my past colleagues, and I used to tap dance, more percussive than anything. It's been COVID kind of had a little bit of a damper on that, but yeah, that's me.
That's awesome that your work has that music connection, and that's one of your passions as well. So combining those 2 in your world. What instrument do you play in your band?
I play the tenor ukulele. So if you are a ukulele enthusiast, really it's just a small guitar, because it's not the official ukulele. It's a little bit bigger than the ukulele. And then I also play clarinet and I sing.
Oh my goodness, that is amazing. Well, thank you for sharing those talents with us today. That's great. Sandra, let me come your way.
Hi, I'm Sandra Mussman. I'm originally from Germany. I'm actually in Germany right now, vacationing at my parents' house. I graduated with a degree in aerospace engineering in December of 2013. And currently I work for Lockheed Martin and also on the Orion program. I'm a systems engineer for Lockheed. And I work with the European Service Module Integration Office, which is a blend research center in Ohio. And basically we're making sure that the European part, which is half the spacecraft, they build all the support, the life support and the propulsion for the spacecraft, can integrate with the Orion module, the crew module. So yeah, it's exciting to have somebody else from the Orion program on the phone as well. We're considered the black sheep, I would say, of the family, because we have to work with the Europeans and a bunch of different nationalities, which I love. It's challenging in different cultures and languages, but it also definitely has its challenges that come with it. I'd say my most interesting hobby is probably, I love dirt biking. I love my home renovation. I do my whole home renovation myself. I live in Denver, Colorado, so there's an endless amount of outdoorsy things to do.
So what is your current home renovation project? Since that's probably a never-ending thing.
Yes, I'm currently redoing the guest bedroom because my parents are coming to visit in August.
So you have some motivation there. That's awesome.
Yes,
And I think
exactly.
you win the prize for the most long distance panelist today. So that's amazing coming to us from afar. Thank you.
Yep, it's 7 p.m., so it's all good.
Oh my goodness. Fabulous. Well, Lauren, let's hear from you.
Yeah, hi Tricia, thanks for having me. Hi, I'm Lauren Tracer. My pronouns are also she, her. I'm actually originally from Ormond Beach, Florida, so grew up right by the beach, miss it a lot. Living in Austin now, though, so at least we have a decent outdoor, I think it's a nice outdoor city. I like it a lot. I graduated from UT Austin in 2020 with a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering and a minor in philosophy of law. And right now I'm actually working with Applied Materials. I joined just this year, right at the beginning of the year, as a technical project manager for their central test engineering team. So something that's really cool about this team that I like a lot is that we service every other group in the company. So we are designing, building, deploying, and then maintaining these test fixtures that test not only our overall product, but also like the subcomponents and subsystems within them. So it's really cool, get to learn a lot about semiconductors and our products really across the board. When I'm not working though, I love to do hot yoga and train my dog. I have a 2-year-old dog and he is a handful. So we've been getting into some more like agility and obedience classes and stuff lately, and that's been a lot of fun.
So what kind of dog do you have?
Oh my gosh, he is a husky cattle dog mix. So very high energy, very high energy. But I love him to death. He makes me smile. I work hybrid, so it's nice to have, like, I say I have the world's cutest coworker.
That's amazing. Well, maybe you can bring him into screen sometime during this panel and we can see him.
I wish I could. Unfortunately, I'm taking this call from the office today, but I am more than happy to send photos out. He's adorable.
That's awesome. Thanks, Lauren.
Yeah,
well,
thank you, Tricia.
The way we're going to kind of walk through this, we're going to actually come back to Lauren here in just a second. We'll talk a little bit about applied materials and mechanical engineering and those professional skills. And then we'll dive into a little bit more on mechanical engineering and then back to the interpersonal skills again. So let me start. As I mentioned, Applied Materials is one of our fabulous corporate partners and supported our Create at UT summer camp for rising high school juniors this summer and has supported that camp for a number of years as students explore engineering and other STEM majors. So Lauren, what got you into this career path? Can you share a little bit more about your educational and career path and maybe what mechanical engineering looks like there at Applied Materials?
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually had kind of an unconventional path through school and to where I'm at now. So I actually started in biomedical engineering, and I started over at Georgia Tech in Atlanta, Georgia. So I had a deep interest in doing medical device design. About after my sophomore year, I took a year-long internship opportunity with a medical device company here in Texas. And I was working with them on some new product design. And I loved the design aspect of it so much that when I returned to undergrad, I wanted to switch over to mechanical engineering just so I had what I felt was more of a broader skill set that could be applied to different industries if I didn't feel like I wanted to stay specific to medical devices. So I transferred over to UT Austin and finished mechanical engineering there. Something that was really great about having that full year of work experience, right in the middle of my undergraduate career was that it put me in this position where I could continue working professionally in the engineering field as a student. So while I was finishing my last couple of years at UT, I was able to work with quite a few different smaller startups in the Austin area, got really into robotics system design, and actually was president of a competitive robotics team at UT for my last year there. So I had just a lot of hands-on experience and that was really great for me. As I was getting towards the end of my degree, I kind of realized I felt like I wanted to expand, or like let me rephrase it, take advantage of all the different kinds of classes and things that UT offers. So I picked up a couple of philosophy classes and really loved them. I felt like it was a totally different perspective and approach to problem solving that honestly I could pull into a lot of my engineering work. And I also ended up taking an intellectual property law class, which I have a very deep personal interest in the law. I have a couple of family members that are attorneys. I've been around it my whole life. So I thought that it was really cool to find this very niche overlap between law and technology in intellectual property. So I wanted to try something very different once I had graduated. So I actually went and worked as a patent agent at a small intellectual property law firm in Austin for about 1.5 years. And in that role, as a patent agent, what you're doing is you're talking to inventors, you're hearing about what their invention is, how it improves something, and then you're writing that patent for them. And then you go to the United States Patent and Trademark Office and you go back and forth with them, trying to convince them to issue this patent. So it was a role where I was doing a lot of interfacing with engineers, but also, government bodies and attorneys and more people on the business side than I had ever been exposed to. So it was very interesting in that regard. It was very technical, a lot of reading and writing. But I did find myself missing being closer to the actual engineering and the innovation there. So after 1.5 years, I decided I would go back into design. I worked at another robotics startup in Austin for about 6 months before actually someone who was on my senior design team at UT called me and said, hey, we have a position on my team for a technical project manager, and you pretty much technically project managed both of our senior design projects and and the robotics team. So I think, like, do you want to come in and hear about it? And I did, and now I'm here. So that's awesome. And it's really great. It's a really great fit for me. I still get to use all of those skills of, communicating with engineers and people in different roles within the same organization. But I also get to leverage my technical skills as well. So I feel very satisfied in that regard. As far as what mechanical engineering and applied materials looks like, it can look really different. The thing that I say I value the most about having the engineering background is that it really teaches you how to learn and how to solve a problem. And my team specifically, no day is the same. Every project that we get is very new. We rarely do any kind of duplicate work, and we're working on products across the entire applied materials portfolio. So we have a few mechanical engineers and then quite a few electrical engineers on the team. But really at Applied, I mean, if you know how to define and solve a problem, then you can pretty much do whatever kind of role that you want, which is something I really love about the company. So you can make mechanical engineering at Applied look like whatever you want it to look like for the most part. Yeah.
That's awesome. And you touched on this a little bit, but since we're also talking interpersonal skills today, how does that come into play in your work, especially as maybe this project manager role? What does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, definitely. So in an engineering role or a management role, either one, you're going to be using interpersonal skills on a daily basis. You're working on a team, you're working on complex problems. You might be working on a project that is spanning regions. So you're working with people that are from different cultures and have speak different languages. So as far as interpersonal skills go, I mean, I think sometimes we fail to highlight how important soft skills are in engineering, right? Because you can have all the technical knowledge in the world, but if you can't communicate it clearly to another person, it's going to be pretty tough. As far as in a project management role, so my responsibility, right? I'm the person responsible for project success. So if they say, someone comes to me and says, I need a new test fixture, I need it by this day. How we get from point A to Z is my responsibility. So I have whoever's asking me, normally it's a group of people. I would consider them the project stakeholders. And then on my side, I have my engineering team. So my team is actually global. We have people in China, we have people in India, Singapore, in the US here. So I will work with the engineers one-on-one to kind of analyze the problem and say, okay, what are our options as far as meeting the customer's requirements? And then once we develop a plan and put it in place, from there, really, as a project manager, your role is like 95% communication. I am doing everything that I can to make sure that my customer, who is an internal customer in this case, is up to date on what is going on with the project. If there's anything that comes up, any kind of roadblocks that would cause a schedule delay or an increase in cost, talking to them and helping them understand why this is happening, and if they're not okay with what about the project schedule or cost has changed, what we need to do as far as resetting their expectations in terms of delivery of the project. So interpersonal skills, really, it's so broad. It can be communication, it's about accountability. And then you have the other side when I'm working with the engineers, right? This is my team, and I'm the leader of the project team. So there is responsibility on my end when it comes to, team morale, making sure that team members are working together well, that they feel heard and understood and appreciated as members on the team. And it's highly collaborative. So I think when you bring a lot of people together into one room and everyone is skilled and everyone is smart and everyone has their idea of how they want something to be done, conflict will naturally arise. So conflict resolution is a skill that I've been using a lot more in this role. And honestly, I find it really fun. I think it is very interesting to sit down with people and kind of figure out, like, where are you coming from? What do you really need and what really matters here? Maybe we can get some of this other, personality clash stuff to the side and come together as a team to make this happen. So this role for sure has been the most demanding as far as my use of interpersonal skills in the workplace. Absolutely.
That's awesome. And kind of applying that engineering mindset and those problem solving skills to the interpersonal side of things.
Exactly.
As well. So that's great.
Exactly.
So let's continue talking a little bit about mechanical engineering. So we have Clayton and Caitlin here. Can you share maybe a little bit more about your pathways into mechanical engineering and your careers, and what does your work look like? Maybe share a project or experience to give us a little deeper dive into mechanical engineering. Caitlin, you want to start?
Sure, happy to. You kind of hit the nail on the head earlier when you said that it's nice that my hobbies kind of correspond with my work. And I got to a point where I knew I wanted to do engineering. And I was at a smaller university, kind of double majoring in physics and math, trying to figure out, at the last minute coming out of high school, I decided that civil engineering wasn't what I wanted to do, but I didn't know what kind I wanted to do. And a couple years in, I literally Googled, what can I do with physics, math, and music? And the Society for Physics students popped up. And with that membership, you get a free membership to pick one of the list. And the Acoustical Society of America, AC, it's pretty high up there alphabetically. I said, well, what is this? And did some research, didn't get too much back from them. Long story short, ended up talking to an acoustician, and they said, well, I said, what degree should I get? Because this sounds fascinating. And they said, well, mechanical or electrical. And I said, electrical sounds hard. Let's go mechanical. Little did I know I was going to have to learn that anyway. So I transferred into UT at that point. I think there's a pretty good experience coming in as a transfer student to UT. So that was nice. There's a lot of support there. And kind of hammered through a lot of coursework that I didn't know how I was going to apply it, to be honest. I was told early in my physics math degree pursuit that, what you learn in school is likely not what you're using on the job, but it's the problem solving that you're going to be, that whole method and technique of problem solving and your interpersonal skills that you're going to have to apply. And that's totally true for me. There are definitely times where, I talk about what my colleagues have a background in. There's some who are engineers, mechanical, electrical, architectural engineering, music majors. One of my mentor has a degree in music, and then started off pulling cable for an AV company and is self-taught on the acoustics and engineering side. Definitely helps to have the math and science background, but they're all over the place. And so I think it helps when I'm looking specifically at mechanical engineering curriculum, kind of my fluid mechanics, because some of the noise control calcs that we have to do are very much dependent on whether or not the airflow is turbulent or laminar, right? Is it smooth, or as it comes around this corner, is it gonna, cause a bunch of noise as things kind of get mixed up? It's also nice at UT that, in mechanical engineering, you're required to take some hours of what they call career gateway electives. And we do have, UT does have an acoustics course in the mechanical engineering department. The electrical engineers can take, so I got to meet some student colleagues at that point who are also interested in a similar field. And it very much takes what you learned in early physics about wave and spring mass damper systems and applies them to acoustics and sound moving through a room. I don't touch that textbook very much, to be perfectly honest. It's very theoretical, but it does give a pretty good foundation, coming into, if I'm standing in a room and I'm trying to figure out how is sound moving around in here. I do get to draw back on some of that coursework. So, if it's a project that we're designing on, that we're called in, we sit on a team that includes the architect, it includes all other consultants, so civil, landscape, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, anybody else structural, lots of engineers in the room of different disciplines, and then lots of people who are on the aesthetic side, the architect, and maybe sometimes the end user client and that sort of thing. And, then becomes a practice of, like Lauren said, communicating, the more technical details. People don't typically think about the acoustics in a space until they have to. I get all the time is, I didn't even know that could be a job. And I said, I didn't either until someone said it, or I found it. And I thought, well, of course. And that's typically the reaction that I get when someone, when I talk about what I do is, well, of course, somebody has to do that. I just wouldn't have thought about it. So we get to kind of explain why what we do is important every day when we come with recommendations that make a project cost more or look different than the architect might want it to look. So yeah, I mean, a day in the life would consist of consulting on how sound is moving around in the space, how to keep from hearing things that you don't want to be heard in the room, and whether that be other speech, whether it be mechanical noise and that sort of thing. So it's definitely a mix of my engineering background and interpersonal skills, really, when it comes down to it. I think that some of the more challenging conversations happen, and the conflict resolution doesn't necessarily happen on the design side, but it happens more so, I should say, the more my job title changes to get to be kind of higher up in the company. It's very collaborative as far as design work internally, but when you start to handle conflict resolution, it's more so the higher up you are in the company, the more you have to have these challenging conversations about maybe something got missed, or there's a conflict in who's going to pay for what. And it's those types of not as fun conversations that come later on, I think.
That's awesome. And now I think our audience will think differently maybe when they're in a space and the sound is doing something weird, or they're curious as to why do I hear it like this? Now you can all think about Caitlin and connect that sound in your spaces to mechanical engineering. That's fabulous. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, sure.
Clayton.
Yeah, so it's kind of been fun to hear how we've all started with mechanical engineering and then kind of go different ways. So my experience was kind of similar to Caitlin's. It started out with a Google search. I knew that I always wanted to do something in healthcare, so I Googled healthcare professions, and I found prosthetics and orthotics come up on the list. So I thought that sounded pretty cool, and luckily my parents were very encouraging and encouraged me to reach out to some local clinics here in Fort Worth. And so they kind of connected me to one of the schools, because there's only about 13 schools in the whole country. And so I went and visited UT Southwestern in Dallas and kind of saw what they did there, saw some of the curriculum there, and met with the program director who said, you should major in mechanical engineering. So my dad is an engineer and so is my grandfather. So they were like, you should totally do engineering. I said, yeah, I think that sounds pretty cool. So went to UT, did mechanical engineering, took a lot of hard but really fun and challenging classes. And then also had to get a bunch of prereqs for the healthcare degree. So I took a lot of biology, a lot of chemistry, a lot of anatomy, those kinds of like pre-med classes without it being like a going into med school. So that's kind of how that timeline ended up. In my day-to-day life, I can be doing like anything you can imagine. So a day in life for me, we have appointments seeing patients. So I am actually the one seeing patients that come in for prosthetics and orthotics. Right now, I'm focusing more on orthotics, which is any kind of brace. So that could be anything like a cranial remolding helmet for a baby who might have a misshapen head. That could be a back brace for someone who breaks their back at the hospital. That could be a custom brace for someone who's had a stroke. Literally anything you can imagine, we do it. So that's really something cool about this job, is that you never know what's going to walk in the door. And the best part for me is that I'm helping people kind of get back some functions that they've lost. So in engineering, the kind of career gateway electives that I focused on that Caitlin was talking about earlier are the materials science classes. So I took a bunch of materials because we deal with carbon fiber layups and that kind of thing every day. So I actually have one of our braces over here that this is laid up specifically to a patient's height and weight. So it's kind of hard to see, but it does flex a little bit. So that is something cool that we get to do on the design aspect, is we can kind of tell our fabrication guys, hey, this is what the patient's needing specifically, and then they know how to lay it up. So kind of having like the background of the math and science in that from my engineering degree is pretty cool.
That is awesome. And I can hear it from you as well, that interpersonal skill side of things with the patients and being able to understand what it is that they are telling you or what it is that the doctors have said that they need, and then communicating that back to the fabricators and being able to translate between all of that is a skill set in and of itself.
Yeah, for sure. We also work a lot with physical therapists. So kind of working under a doctor with their prescription, working with a physical therapist who sees the patient every day, and then us having to create the brace based off of everything that everyone's seeing. It's really cool to be like in an interdisciplinary field like that.
That's fabulous. Well, thank you for sharing that as well. And participants, I'm going to give you a heads up that we'll be turning it over to you all for questions here just shortly. But I want to go to Sandra and Jessica, and I think it's a perfect tie-in to the interpersonal skills with both of them, because you heard they're working on the same project. They are not in the same location. They're not working for the same organizations, but yet they're working on the same project. And so what does interpersonal skills mean to y'all, and how does this come into play in your work? Jessica, do you want to start?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was excited when I saw that I was looking at the list of panels and I was like, oh, another Orion person, yay. But no, I did not know this name specifically. So great to have her on today as well. My role, like I was explaining, in integrating all of the systems that the crew uses during a mission, and the different phases of that mission that we have to accommodate. So pre-launch, on orbit, post-landing, or EDL, entry descent landing, and then post-landing. Many different teams, lots of different key stakeholders, including the crew office and health and medical and engineering technical authorities, safety technical authorities that have each have their own approach and interpretation of any particular, the performance of any system and their expectations regarding the performance of any of these systems, whether it be an emergency response system or a nominal vehicle commanding up through the displays and controls console, the ECLA system performance, the suit system performance, exercise system, food systems, all the things, right? In fact, we're tackling a lot of issues right now with the waste management system having acoustics, causing a lot of acoustics issues in our spacecraft. So working through that right now, very appreciate that discipline for sure. So with all that, for me, there's been a lot of growth in this interpersonal, sphere of how does my job require some interpersonal skills. And I think I heard Lauren say it's about 95% of the job, but yeah, for sure. And not just in the verbal and like leadership and meetings, but in writing as well. Lots of writing and documentation of things that everybody can remain in alignment on what the expectation is for how these systems perform in the mission. I wanted to highlight a couple of things that came to my mind about interpersonal skills. And I feel like it's hopefully interdisciplinary. Hope people will stand behind that. So Maya Angelou has that quote, right? I'm not going to get it exactly right, but the gist of it is, in the end, people will often forget what you said. They can even forgive you for what you may have done, but they're never going to forget how you made them feel, right? And that plays into how you manage conversations and conflict resolution and problem solving and knowing your audience when people are bringing problems to you and that require additional integration or maybe expansion of a solution space or a different implementation than we may have done before. Allowing for that conversation and making sure you really got to turn on those listening skills and active listening, and then also preparing for being responsible for your response rather than a reaction. A lot of times there's some of these topics can be pretty heated. They may have a lot of a history or emotion behind them, especially when we're talking about like a fire system response ConOps in a spacecraft, something like that. There can be a lot of emotion there, and the ability to really use those listening and responding skills is what allows people to feel like they are being heard and that they are a part of the solution process. And that's really key for interpersonal skills. The other thing I wanted to talk about is all of the interpersonal interactions that I've had. They go much smoother when there's a baseline or a foundation of trust established, and that comes from your ability to show up, my personal ability to show up with integrity and doing what I'm going to do, and honoring my word and holding others accountable for their word, and managing that expectation rather than being overly critical or criticizing of a person. So when you establish expectations or you put agreements down and you think you're working to something and you think you're in alignment, but then all of a sudden something comes up and you determine, or there's evidence that things are not going as you had planned as the manager or the integrator, the conversation needs to be around the issue at hand and the commitment to resolving the issue at hand, not criticizing the person or an opinion or a perspective and that kind of thing. So that goes back to this foundation of trust and integrity, and then of course making sure people feel heard, and that you can show up and have an ability to respond rather than react.
I love that. And that kind of ties in that the relationship building skills that are also just intertwined there with those interpersonal skills. Sandra, what about you?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because so I work in this really small team at Lockheed, and we're having to communicate with Airbus, who are building the European service module. But the way the contract is laid out is really interesting because we don't have any direct contracts with each other, and yet we together have to build the spacecraft, the Orion spacecraft. And, you know, as I already mentioned, there's so many interfaces, all this life support system, the propulsion system, all of that goes all the way from the service module up to the crew module, and making sure that we can communicate. I mean, we all work to the same set of requirements, but, you know, there's many ways on how to meet a requirement and to make sure we all meet the requirement the same way, such that when we mate the vehicle, we can actually mate the vehicle and all the interfaces will work out and the software does what it's supposed to do. That definitely gets very challenging, especially when you work with time zone changes. You know, all of our days only have 24 hours. There's different workforce laws in Europe that they work to, so they can't just work as many hours as we would like them to sometimes. And it's challenging, the languages, the cultural backgrounds, and yeah, the most important part is to listen to people when there's many conflicts. And just like on the crew system side, there's a lot of issues with a lot of history behind them, sometimes with a lot of emotions, and they definitely can get in the way. I've been in meetings where I was glad that I was kind of just a fly on the wall because it can definitely get heated. And then the challenge is to how do you get people back, relax, and just everybody gets back on the same page. And I think a key component to that is if you can translate as subject matter experts detailed knowledge of one system, if you can translate that to the other subsystems such that they can understand on how this little very important component works, but they have to integrate with it. I think that's a major key because a lot of times is when a software person talks to an avionics person or a software person talks to a propulsion person, they don't speak necessarily the same language. So for our team in particular, we kind of translate one person's language so that the other person can understand it. We bring the people into one room, talk to each other so that we all can have one interface, that when the big day of mating comes, we don't have any more issues. And that comes with a lot of listening, a lot of problem solving, a lot of understanding each other and being non-judgmental about it, because we all come from different backgrounds. We all have different approaches to things. And we can't assume just because we built something one way in the US that the Germans would build it the exact same way. And it doesn't make it wrong or bad. It's just a different approach. And so we have to find the common ground in a healthy way, not in a yelling or arguing kind of way. So I think listening and just being able to, I can't think of the English word right now, but to just listen and make sure everybody's on the same page at the end of the meeting. So it always helps me to, at the end of a meeting, to summarize everything, to make sure everybody understands it. And I always like to explain it as if I was talking to my toddler. And if then people would understand it, then we're good. But always explain things like you're talking to a toddler.
That's awesome. So, you know, I think you all have a variety of different experiences and experience levels. And I'll come back to Sandra and then back to you, Jessica, on this one. How do you gain these communication skills and interpersonal skills? Does it just come with time? Or are there things that you have done to help build those skills and gain that confidence in those skills?
I think for me, it was a lot of life lessons. So I moved to the US when I was 20. Right after high school, I decided, I got married at the time in the US, and I decided, hey, why not move over there? And you just have to figure a lot of things out on your own. And I think that helped me a lot. I had to ask a million questions to understand how life in the US works compared to Germany. And I think that's definitely served me very, very well later in life and in my career, I'm not afraid to ask questions. There's no such thing as a dumb question, and it will never make you look stupid if you ask me questions. Don't ever assume anything. I know in engineering classes, we always learn, make all these engineering assumptions. But in real life, don't assume, ask the question. And it's never going to make you look less of an engineer. I think that served me very well. And that will gain you that credibility too, because it shows, okay, you're able to admit that you don't know something. It's okay we can't know everything. Collectively, we have a lot of knowledge, but each and every single individual, we can't know everything. So yeah, I think it's just my life path that's kind of taught me those lessons.
That's great. And yeah, asking questions is super important for sure. Jessica.
Yeah, I second everything Sandra just said. That all that sentiment is very true. I also had a few different life experiences that allowed me to understand kind of how this interpersonal communication becomes a little bit more required in some circumstances, and then maybe the technical knowledge that we have. One of the things that I had the opportunity to do was when I was a senior in high school in Alaska, I was lucky, super lucky, that one of the only high schools in Alaska that had a Russian language teacher. And she was 100% committed to that role. And she every other year would coordinate a exchange student program with a school in Russia that was in St. Petersburg. And my senior year, I got to participate in that program. And I mean, my mind was just blown as to how, there is definitely more than one way to solve problems. There's more than one way to communicate about a problem. There's more than one way to teach things and write things. So I carried that with me when I went to UT and then started doing my co-op at NASA. It was always clear to me that you're going to be, every single individual person is going to have a way that they learned something and that they apply something based on their own unique experience. And every single person is going to be able to kind of bring something different to the table. And so that experience for sure. I also have actively recognized that just looking around, I recognize that the people that were really my personal role models at work at NASA at Johnson Space Center that really were good leaders did this, they managed this themselves and this communication around the room very well. And so I started to seek out different training opportunities and coaching opportunities that helped me grow those skills, because it's almost like, in a way, you're kind of unlearning the systematic approach that you learn in engineering school, and you're instead thinking much more holistically, systemically, thinking about how interfaces, every system starts to develop its own behavior and then behave differently inside the other larger system that is the spacecraft, right? In my case. And that piece of it is not necessarily, there's no expert on how that happens. It's really a series of understanding how to, what kind of questions to ask, how to investigate, how to manage the bigger picture and operate at that level and think on that level, which is all about asking questions and having these interpersonal skills and knowing how to get the information that you need from the experts and the expertise that's out there. So yeah, that's my story.
I think I would like to add to that really quick. Especially when you have to ask the question to the expert, every expert answers in a different way. So you have to be able to read how a different expert needs to be asked a question so that you get what you need from the expert. That's definitely been my experience a lot.
It's that translating again that many of you all have talked about, translating and understanding through those relationships, how to get where you need to go. I love that. All right, I know we are coming up against our time, but we do have one question that came through the Q&As that I want to make sure we get to. Sachi, do you want to ask that question to our panelists?
Yeah, definitely. So the question that was in the chat is, do you have any advice for incoming freshmen in mechanical engineering?
I can hop in. I know I was a transfer student, but still, it kind of depends on, if your current level of activity is in high school, I was one of those people who I did a little bit of everything. I was in 10 different organizations, extracurriculars with like associated with school and outside of school. And when I came to UT, I said, I'm just going to do school and figure out what this looks like for me. And then I ended up in 10 different organizations. But I do recommend taking some time to kind of look around. And a number of people have mentioned this today is UT has a lot to offer. And even if you don't end up at UT, I'm sure your university will have a lot to offer. And so figure out kind of what your coursework is going to look like, rebuild your process of studying, and whatever it is that you've already probably figured out some of those skills, figure out what that looks like for you in college, and then dip your toe into a number of things that you might not have otherwise tried, or things that you are tried and true that you love. You're going to need an outlet somehow. You might feel pressed for time, you might feel stressed with your course load, but you need something else. And maybe that something else is just sitting in a quiet place, find a place on campus sort of thing, but try to take advantage of what the city that you're in and the university that you're at has to offer. And you'll meet a lot of cool people that you might not otherwise have seen outside your building.
One thing that I would like to add, just on top of what Caitlin said, is just remember that there's not like one right way to do something or your career or life. Like if you feel drawn or curious or pulled to something, just go after it. I mean, like the whole 4 years, there's a certain XYZ 1, 2, 3 way of doing it. It's different for every person, and it's just not worth like trying to put that pressure on yourself. And I think a lot of the times you might, I mean, I personally had this experience, you will like miss out on some things that like you definitely would have been really into. So if you feel curious or pulled, go for it. And everyone's on their own timetable and has their own path. So try not to put too much pressure on yourself in that regard.
I'll also jump in and say, don't be afraid to make mistakes because they're going to happen and it's going to be okay. I made a couple of stinky grades here and there, and I still ended up exactly where I wanted to be. So all those kinds of things, I know it's so stressful to compare yourself to others with grades or internships and co-ops and who's doing what. But if you really take the time to focus on what you want to do and your end goal, it'll all work out. And then also kind of going off what people said earlier, not being afraid to ask for help or ask questions. I know I was a little intimidated at first to ask some professors for help or go into office hours or even ask some of my classmates that I knew understood the content better than I did for help, but you're all there together, so.
Sandra and Jessica, any last words of advice you would have for incoming or current students?
I appreciate everything. Appreciate everything everyone just said. And I would add, for me personally, I know I got to a point like mid-sophomore year in the aerospace curriculum that I was really starting to question, like, is this for me? And had I not had that opportunity to go be in the work environment, actually have a co-op or an internship that resonated with me. And in my case, it was, doing some human spaceflight related stuff at Johnson Space Center that really got my mind to understand that this theoretical engineering, principles that I was learning about, they apply completely differently depending on the job that you end up in. And that really saved me and kept me, gave me that opportunity to step back, see how it applies in the workplace. Does this workplace and the rhythm and how the work is executed, does it align with me and like my energy and what I really want to be doing with this material? And it did. So then I could go back to school and be like, okay, yeah, this isn't my favorite class, but I'm going to get through it because I know what's on the other side. And so for anybody that's kind of feeling that way, that opportunity, looking around for that opportunity to be mentored or to have that experience in the workplace while you're earning your degree is critical.
And sorry, my 5-year-old tells me he's hungry. So I think for me, I'd just like to add that, again, my grades were not the best. They were good enough to graduate. They were not good enough to get any internships. I'm a first generation college graduate, so I really had nobody to guide me through any of it or explain to me what engineering will look like at some point. But I just always had this goal in mind. Like, I didn't care that I didn't get internships. I mean, I was upset at times. I was like, oh gosh, I'm never going to get a job. And no, I didn't straight out of college. Like, it took applying to a million different companies. And, but it took, I'd say, about 3-4 months. And then I was able to get a job. And ultimately, I just never gave up on this goal. I always envisioned myself walking across that stage. And that's what kept me going after failure, after failure, after failure. You just have to pick yourself back up. And if you believe in yourself, it's going to happen. It's going to lead you to great paths. I mean, yeah, I can definitely attest to that.
That's awesome. What great advice, and what great stories and experiences you all had to share with our participants today and those who watch this later. I know that the experiences that you all had and that understanding of how important relationships are as part of those interpersonal skills. And I love that you all were just sharing about the failures along the way, because we all struggle and we learn and we keep pressing on. And as Sandra said, that, you know, belief in yourself and knowing that you can get there is super important. So thank you all for joining us on this journey today. I threw the fabfems.org link in the chat again, as well as our YouTube channel. We have another FabFems Friday coming up next Friday, so watch our social media for that. Thank you again, fabulous panelists. Thank you again, Sachi, for helping out. And thanks again to Applied Materials for being a fabulous summer camp partner for us again, and for Lauren joining us from them today. Have a fabulous weekend. Let's get Sandra's kiddo out there getting that lunch, because we're all probably hungry, and have a fantastic rest of your weekend. Thank you, everybody.